it's only like say 8 inches, big, so you can't lay down inside of it. You can't get into it once it's sealed. Like it's too thin for someone to fit inside of. At the end of it, there's a capstone with two copper plugs, right, that are holding the stone in place. That's already mysterious. Why copper? Why that's there? What that shaft was for? But more interesting, right above it is a diagram of dots. And when they filmed the dots and brought them out and looked at them, those dots, along with what looks like to be a very straight T and a base, point to a certain. They figured out that it's actually a constellational diagram of where stars are, and they realized that that shaft was marked with what the sky looked like at the time it was built. And when they matched those star patterns in the computer, and they dialed it to make all those star patterns match correctly, along with other markers that were left on that chart, it points, guess what, 9200 BC.
Yeah.
So that, to me, that is independent. So now you have a geologist, Dr. Robert Schoch, saying, hey, the water and rain patterns here are roughly this old. And then, separate from geology, you have a star chart that can't be done after the fact and faked because the shaft is too tiny and has been sealed, that shows a star pattern of 9200 BCE. That, to me, is two independent sources saying these structures point to a civilization much older than the Egyptians. And I suspect that the Egyptian Antiquities Group has lobbied exceptionally hard and, in fact, kept people from looking at anything deeply within Egypt because it is very much in their favor because of tourism and because of income from tourism to keep Egypt as the primary mother of civilizations and not talk about this civilization X that may be as old as 10,000 to 15,000 BCE.
And just think of the technology they had. Everybody, not everybody, but some of these people have come up with all these ideas how the pyramids and how the Sphinx was made, but they have no way to back up, how it actually was done. I don't think they even, with our technology, we can't even duplicate it. How far they had to, transport those big stones from the quarry to, out in the middle of the desert. Even with the amount of slaves they had, they would have ran out of slaves. Let's face it. I mean, they wouldn't have enough slaves to move that, to build even one pyramid, because they would all have died off, and it would have been impossible. It tells me that they had technology back then far superior than what we have.
Well, I think that's what's really interesting, and what I love about this conversation is it's very naturally, showcasing some of the things I'm doing in my book Mythborn, where I've always postulated that there was a precursor civilization, something that existed long before the civilizations that we know of today, a prehistoric dynastic civilization before. Like if you look at the the Sumerian kings lists, right? These kings lists have a number of kings that are listed, some which we know existed, and then others that archaeologists have said, oh, well, that's just fantasy, they're just making things up, blah, blah. But here's the funny thing. When you look at the kings list and you go back a few, one of the kings listed on there is the Sumerian word for Rama. And Rama is listed as a king who ruled a city that translates to Ayodhya, which is what they call it in India, but there they call it like Awar or something. I can't remember exactly what it was. And his reign was 60 years, which is exactly what it says in the Mahabharata. And the timing of the two is exactly it's correct, and they match each other. And then if you look at the fact that the kings list has Rama in it, and Rama's from another culture, but known as a king of northern India and Persia, so that those areas were mixing. And you know that in Rama's history, he has supposed to, when his wife was stolen by Ravana, which was the king of Sri Lanka, and taken, an army of monkeys under the god Hanuman came to Rama's aid and helped him build a bridge from the southern tip of India to Sri Lanka to rescue his wife. Well, guess what? Landsat, they found a bridge that looks to be built by people because the rocks and stones used are not in the order that you would find geologically. They have been upturned so that, different rocks are on top that are more stable or stronger, and that, better mortar rocks or base rocks are at the bottom. This is, incredible to me. And I think, that's the kind of information I wish would go mainstream more often, because I think there's a whole world of information that's still out there about our distant ancestors. I suspect some of it may be hidden in the Sphinx if it hasn't been taken out by somebody already. And I suspect there's other places in the world where knowledge of who we were, or of the technology and the societies that existed before Sumeria. I suspect that they're out there, and I for one would love to learn about it.
Well, I would too, because my feeling, now that's just my feeling, I think this planet has been rebooted. I think basically it's been cleaned off maybe once or twice. So I think it's a lot older than what they have even begun to tell us. So I think we might be on the second or third generation of, human beings or facsimile on this planet.
One of the things that I love that you are saying that, and I would challenge you to expand that thought to even larger, deep time frames. So just think about this, right? In the last million years, which is nothing geologically, right? But the last million years, you could have had everything that's happened in our recorded history show up. That's only 10,000 years, right? So if you divide a million by 10,000, right, then you take basically 4 zeros off. You could have had it happen 100 times. Our entire history 100 times. Now, let's just say that it only happened 10% of the time. 10 civilizations could have happened in the last million years, and we wouldn't know about any of them, right? Because it's over 10,000 years old. There'd be no trace of them.
Well, I mean,
right?
unless
they left something for us.
Well, you got so many things, like Yellowstone, what is it?
Yeah.
Every 10,000 years it has a major eruption. That's a cleaning of the earth, basically. And if that happened, then you also, like I was talking about the Sphinx, that tells me that, out in the middle of the desert was part of an ocean at one time.
There definitely was.
Yeah, and so things have changed, and a lot of people don't realize. I mean, they sit there and, Al Gore, 25, 30 years ago was saying the earth is going to change. We're going to, all this crap is going to happen to us. Everybody looked at him like he was a fruitcake. They really did. And then, our administration here last week says it's not going to happen to like 2120. Now they're saying it's going to happen, like 2020, or 2040, I should say, that things could start actually happening where people won't be able to live in certain parts of the world because of the heat. And then you go some other place else, it could go the opposite, instead of the heat, you could be freezing. And not just that, I mean, people don't realize when Antarctica melts and thaws, and at the rate it's going faster than they even mildly expected it to. I mean, just recently, the major breakup, it won't take long before Florida is gone. Parts of the East Coast are going to be, unless you live on a nice mountainside, it's going to be, getting wet. And people don't realize you can't keep doing what we're doing. And that is proof right there. It doesn't take 1,000,000 years or 10,000 years where it could wipe out civilization. It could do it in a matter of 100 years or 50 years. I mean, the Earth is in a Earth wobble a little bit right now.
Yep.
The magnetic field is not just going in inches now. It's major. moving, the Earth is about ready, I think, to cleanse itself. I mean, then you got Yellowstone, which they're saying, hey, it could go any time. And people don't realize that food in our supply chain, there's 72 days worth of food, and then people are going to start starving to death.
Yeah, and I will real quick. I just want to circle back and just give you the direness of Yellowstone, right? So it actually erupts every 600,000 to 800,000 years.
I'm sorry,
but but that's okay. But the last time it erupted was 630,000 years ago, and when it erupted last time, here's some craziness, right? So Mount St. Helens was 0.24 cubic miles in terms of its size of its eruption, 0.24, right? So about a quarter of a mile, right? The last Yellowstone eruption was 240 cubic miles. That's 1,000 times bigger than Mount St. Helens, and the one before that Yellowstone was 600 cubic miles, 3 times bigger than that. So you're right about one thing. When Yellowstone goes, it's going to reset the world. And, I don't think people fully really understand how quickly and how effectively everything we've done can be wiped clean, right? So, the question, I think all the time is, in the time we have, are we doing everything we can to, make this world better? And as we look at these ancient societies and ancient cultures, and we are able to decipher what they faced, what they chose, what they did, can we learn from them, right? Can we learn things from them? Because I'll tell you, a society just as advanced as ours that existed, 500,000 years ago, or let's say around the time of the last Yellowstone eruption, 600,000 years ago, we would have no idea they were here, right? 600,000 years ago is nothing in the age of the Earth. The Earth is 4.8 billion years old, or 4.5 billion years old, so that's nothing, right? But we would never have an idea of a culture that existed 600,000 years ago.
Oh, no, you wouldn't.
And so what's crazy is, when I sat down to write Mythborn, and and it's been really well received. I wanted to build this like precursor civilization and really weave all these things that are happening. Like, why do all of our cultures have a flood myth? Why, if you're going to have a cataclysm myth that the world is remade, you would think that there'd be an even spread of comets and volcanoes and earthquakes and floods and whatever, right? That when God gets angry, you wouldn't see a favorite way of destroying the earth amongst all different cultures, and yet you do. In all of them, it's a flood. No one talks about a comet. They're all a flood. And so I theorize that there are things that happened way in the past with ancient civilizations, maybe some that were technologically advanced. And imagine a world where technology works like nanotechnology, where essentially it's such high science that it's almost magic. Imagine that world and that world's gods, who are real walking beings, changing the world around them. And after they die, those legends, those myths, are what we remember today, and that's what Mythborn sort of follows. And so, if you like, some of the stuff we've been talking about in the last 40 minutes, and you also like martial arts, and you can get into the idea of assassins and things like that. But it's really, really based in some historically accurate archaeology and some unanswered questions. Then I think it's a great chance for you to open your mind a little bit and enjoy a great read in Mythborn.
Oh yeah, and we're going to talk about your books here in a minute. But I'm thinking, even going back to prehistoric man, in the caves, finding drawings like men flying in the sky, or men, like with like a spacesuit on. I mean, things like that they found both in, in different parts of the world. So that, hey, it has what they seen something, and that's how they, put it down, to